coming to you from Strings and Things Studio in Ventura, California. Welcome to the Strings Unraveled Book Club. Hey!
So, what did we read this month?
We read a book called A Gentleman in Moscow. Moscow. I'm not sure how to pronounce it because I'm American. And by Amor Tolls. And that is his real name.
I know it's his real name. I looked it up.
But it was funny.
But it's a great name.
It's a great name.
Like his mother had a poetic.
Yes, his work will be
from
eternal
start.
because he's immortal.
Well, I was hearing more actually mortal, like a mortal. You know? Not immortal.
Just a mortal.
Yeah.
Anyway, before I get into the
man.
synopsis, how do we feel about it?
I loved it. I was sad at it.
It's okay if you don't
I
love
didn't
it.
like it at
Okay.
all.
At all?
Not really. I have a list of pros and cons, and I have one pro.
Wow.
That's good.
But there's always got to be
That's
one,
fine.
so
That's
I'm that
fine.
one.
That makes it a really interesting discussion. Rather than we all loved it, it was great. The
Yeah.
end.
Now let's talk about how
So,
great it was.
yeah.
I mean, we could still do that.
Oh, yeah. I'm actually interested to hear your takes on it. Because,
Why we liked it?
Yeah. I mean, I'll be like, I want to hear why you liked it. But I looked at the reviews, and there's like for every 100 5-star reviews, there's one like 2 or 3-star review.
All right.
So the majority of people felt like you guys do. So
But there's actually a pretty significant group of people that just didn't care for it. I mean, 3 is more of a meh, but it's pretty strong if you only give it a 1 or 2. So, I mean, it's a nice mixed group, I guess. So, so before we get into overall review, let me just give you a quick synopsis. Let me find where that is. A Gentleman in Moscow immerses us in another elegantly drawn era with the story of Count Alexander Rostov. When, in 1922, he is deemed an unrepentant aristocrat by a Bolshevik tribunal, the court has sentenced the Count is sentenced to house arrest in the Metropole, a very grand hotel across the street from the Kremlin. Rostov, an indomitable man of erudition and wit, boy, there's all kinds of $5 words in here, has never worked a day in his life, and now he must live in an attic room while some of the most tumultuous decades of Russian history are unfolding outside the hotel's doors. Unexpectedly, his reduced circumstances provide him a doorway into a much larger world of emotional discovery. Brimming with humor, a glittering cast of characters, and one beautifully rendered scene after another, the singular novel casts a spell as it relates the Count's endeavor to a deeper understanding of what it means to be a man of purpose. And that is the synopsis. So there's a lot more to it, though. It's almost like you go through the different decades with him, and he evolves. But parts... I think he does, actually. I mean, he doesn't seem to be a guy who... I mean, he goes to the attic with a little bit of stuff, and he seems to be okay with it, which is surprising.
Yeah, I'm
for
not
an
sure
aristocrat.
that he actually evolves a lot, but he certainly has a full life in this limited circumstances.
right.
I think
he's always the indomitable.
Yeah.
No, I'm not entirely positive because I didn't look up dictionary.com. What is indomitable?
Well,
Like unable to be dominated.
yeah, like
I think
You can't beat him down.
I mean,
Something like that.
he certainly has his trials,
Mhm.
but he is.
I think there's a point where he almost gives in to his carefree attitude.
Impossible to subdue or defeat.
There you go.
That's mostly true, but I think there's a point where that becomes less true, and then something happens that changes
Well, we
his
don't
ship.
have to. I think we should just make it a rule. We don't have to be cagey about that.
No.
If you didn't read
If
the
you're
book, we're going to
reading,
spoil
if you're
it.
listening to the podcast and
Yeah.
you haven't read the book, pause it now. Listen to however many hours, and then come back.
And I bet the first complaint is it's too long.
No, I didn't
No?
mind. I didn't notice
It
that
was
it was.
long,
I mean, it
Well,
was long. One of my favorite reviews I saw was a beautifully written book about nothing, and that's kind of how I felt about it. Is that it was long. I didn't hate listening to it, But the more I got into it, the more I was like, is anything ever gonna like really happen?
Well, it's a vignette in a sense.
And I understand,
except it's not small.
No, I understand
It's
what the author is going for. I
an
get
infinite series of vignettes.
The pro I have about this book is that I did not know a lot about the history of Russia beforehand.
Absolutely.
And I thoroughly enjoyed learning about it through the lens of this person's life. And you get to learn all about, just what is happening in Russia during this time period. That I liked. And I get
really
what
like that, yeah.
what the author was doing in using that sort of style to tell that story. But within the main character's story, there's just not a lot of plot. It's a good vehicle to tell stories about other people. Well, yeah, I won't keep going.
Well, I want to say though, because this book speaks to a lot of people's experience of their limited circumstances in quarantine.
Mm-hmm.
So you can sympathize with the character if you're feeling that way. And we learned that it takes about 4 years before you want to throw yourself off a building.
Right.
Which is what we were being cagey
Okay, so
about.
one of the things he mentions.
So we've got 3 years to go, guys.
One of the things he mentions is that you would think that exile would be you're kicked out of your homeland, but he said no. Actually, the bigger punishment that the Russian government feels is that you are not kicked out of your homeland, but you are in permanent timeout away from everything that's happening around you. That it's more of a torture to be able to see life move around you and not participate. I thought that was kind of an interesting take.
My main problem with this story is the character of Alexander himself, in that he's so indomitable, where it's like, was this not hard for him? I mean, it was like 4 years in, he tried to jump off a building, and then he decides not to, and then that's kind of the end of ever hearing about his struggle within living in the hotel for the most part.
He had minor annoyances, but other than that,
I mean, ongoing villain who is trying to take him out.
Right.
But other than that, he doesn't mind being a waiter. He doesn't mind. He becomes a regular working person, and it doesn't seem to bother him.
Well, so this review I read on Goodreads by a person named Robin. I don't know who this person is. That's just their name. It says that there's an unbelievability in this book that made it more saccharine than realistic for me. I imagine there were a lot more claustrophobia and pining for the outside world. Hold on, sorry, my phone's ringing. I imagine there would be a lot more claustrophobia and pining for the outside world than what the Count experiences. His personality barely dips into his imprisonment, which is like, I think it would have been more effective as a story had it been told from a first-person perspective, because you really don't get any internal dialogue.
No, you don't.
And
you
the
don't.
internal dialogue you do get is mostly just like wordy and fluffy and like witticisms and things like that it's not really like, I want to hear what he's feeling. And I just didn't get enough of that for me to believe he's just like a vehicle, like I was saying,
I can see that.
see other people's stories, but him himself is the main character. I just didn't get a lot out of it.
I think that speaks to when in the beginning they said you are a person without purpose. You're just, even the time of the aristocracy was everyone supporting these purposeless people. And that time's over, and how are you going to spend your remainder of your life doing nothing, going nowhere, only being subject to what crumbs of interest fall upon you? He seems to make the best of it, but I hear what you're saying. You never hear, other than a brief panic of, oh my God, I'm a parent now. I did not mean to do that. in an adoptive way,
right?
But even that is not very much. I mean,
he struggles with it for a day, and then we jump forward in time and everything's happy and it's all good. He's like, what the hell am I going to do with this kid?
I kind of wanted to hear more about but that is probably his personality. He doesn't pay attention to the inconveniences that he puts upon other people. It's like, I'm like 2 hours late and this person was doing me a favor. Yeah, and then he did it again and again. So I don't think he really got it. Well, he did it a few times. There's a few places where he's like, oh, I'm late here or I'm late there. And they did talk about, even though he has this clock, he is not ruled by the concept of time because he only has to pay attention to it twice a day.
Well, that's how he was brought up. So it speaks to him never really losing that. And he never loses being, people call him His Eminence for
Right.
his entire stay there, and even though it's against the law,
Yeah, they still call him that.
uh,
He's just too unrealistically charming as a person. You're like, everybody likes this guy because
Except the
he does and
bishop.
says all the right things.
The bishop does not like him
And why is he called the bishop?
because he.
Oh, it's a
his
sarcastic.
name for him. Yeah.
No one else he does. I don't think that character knows that that's what people are calling him.
I guess so.
He's like a
I
loyal.
don't think anybody else calls him. I think it's only Alexander.
It's
in
only
his mind.
Alexander. He doesn't. Because he feels like he's a stuffy old bishop from the
Right.
the government church sponsored people.
No,
it-
there was no religion in
During that time.
communist Russia. No, there's no religion.
This is but he comes from a time of pre-communist.
Yeah, so
Russia.
he's just comparing him to a religious figure, like
A religious
stuffy
figure.
religious figure. Yeah.
So.
I did love the exposure to the history of Germany during this time because it's something that is like a great fog to me. Is like
Oh yeah, in Russia.
there was a revolution. They killed the Tsar and his family, and World War II happened, and now we have the Cold War. And that's that's all I knew.
That was what I knew. I'm like, I don't.
I really enjoyed because that's something. Like there's this charm. There is a charm to the tales of Russian nobility, and they're enchanting and
But they
fairy
seem-
tale like.
Exactly,
He's
they're
like a
very Grimm's fairy tale.
character.
Yeah.
And I liked it.
That's why in my brain, I never really, growing up in post Cold War era Russia, where you only know of lines and deprivation, and I had no idea how very cosmopolitan they were before the revolution.
Oh, I've always been like fascinated with stories of Catherine the Great.
I didn't realize the Metropole was a real place.
Mm-hmm.
You know that I knew the Kremlin was, and I kind of got the idea that it was across. I just want to give a brief history, a very quick history of the Metropole itself. It was opened in 1905, so keeping in mind it was
kind of new.
It was kind of new when he got locked into, and he had been there 4 years before they actually, which is interesting. He had been there 4 years before someone ratted him out and finally said, "Hey, you're not supposed to be here."
I don't think it was a problem that he was there. That's just where he chose to live.
He was not supposed to come back to. He had been in. His mother had helped him go into exile after he had
he moved to Paris.
He moved to Paris.
Home.
He wasn't supposed to come home because he was supposed to.
He was but he was in exile from the monarchy. Not
Ah.
from
it's
the
not
rebels.
that he couldn't come home.
Yeah.
He could come home whenever he wanted. He just kind of knew what was going to happen if he did.
But what's so interesting is so many people kept asking him, "Why are you here?"
Mm-hmm.
When everything's going to shit for everybody else, you came back. Why? And he's like, "I missed it.
Loyal.
I missed my country."
It wasn't just that he wanted to save his grandmother.
He wanted to save his grandma.
And the cost of that was himself.
Yeah. So I guess it's the Metropole Hotel is situated in Theater Square in the heart of Moscow. Like other grand hotels of the era, like the Waldorf Astoria in New York, Claridge's in London, the Ritz in Paris, it set the standard for its city in luxury and service. And it was the first hotel in Moscow to have hot water and telephones in the rooms.
How posh.
International cuisine in the restaurant and an American bar off the lobby. Everyone wants their alcohol like the Americans. Thus, within the days of its opening, it became the preferred stomping ground not only for cosmopolitan travelers, but for the glamorous and well-to-do of the city. And it's funny that throughout, even through the communist era, a lot of people from other countries, that's where they went, was the Metropole. I didn't realize that. This is just 12 years after it found itself serving. 12 years later, it found itself serving as a bastion in a pitched battle between the forces loyal to the Tsar, who it says defending the eastern flank of the Kremlin from the hotel suites, while the Bolsheviks returned fire from the streets below. In the ensuing battle, nearly every window in the hotel was shattered. In fact, when American journalist John Reed, who I have no idea who that is, arrived in the city, he was assured by the Metropole's unflappable front desk captain, "We have some very comfortable rooms if a gentleman does not mind a little fresh air." I'm getting this from the website from the author. So if you want to read more about the Metropole, it goes on it. But it's really pretty interesting. You go to immortals.com, A Gentleman in Moscow, and then you can click on lots of information about the book. So anyway, I just thought that was pretty interesting. And even when they went to the restaurant, they had to seat them in certain the different parties in different portions so that they never really saw each other. But you got to know they knew when they walked in that they were there. Do you remember that?
Well, at that time, I think they were just talking about making sure that, I mean, there was definitely an artfulness to making sure that there was peace within the restaurant, but
That was post the revolution.
yeah.
But he seemed to have a talent for that.
Yeah.
From the youth. He had an organized mind in some respects.
Yeah, so I like that part where his grandmother would task him with creating the seating charts for her grand parties. Yeah, and then he'd, I love picturing this like 13-year-old little boy assessing all of the guests at a royal function and deciding where they should all sit together.
For Chelsea, he really had maybe that's where some of his charm came. His ease is because he understood how to read people really well. I mean, most people that are that charming in my experience are usually crooks. But so it's interesting that in the regard for him,
he's not charming. See, I don't know that I would. He was genteel and always tried to function in the bounds of I guess polite society.
Right.
Mm-hmm. So, which is maybe, I don't know that I'd necessarily call him charming. He was always polite, which has a charm to it.
Mm-hmm. He seemed and maybe his indomitability is what made people view that as charm rather than someone, because they know that if they heard someone talk to them a certain way or whatever, that they would lose it. And he didn't ever seem to lose it, except later in the end, which I totally was glad when he got the gun. But
yeah, but even then, it's like so much control, because I'm like, oh my god, he's gonna ruin it all. He's gonna kill the bishop. And no, he just holds them hostage till it's convenient for him.
Yep. And then he locks them up, saying, "So I'll find you in a couple days."
So measured,
which is so awesome.
I have a show that you will hate then. Okay. Because you're describing like indomitable, and maybe you found that a little annoying that he never.
I kind of feel like if you made him into a character in a movie, he would be so boring.
Yeah.
Okay, you guys have to watch Ted Lasso. It's on Apple TV.
Oh, I've seen that.
I don't get
I
Apple
haven't watched
TV,
it, but I've seen that it's a thing.
It's so hilarious. Just do a free trial of Apple TV and binge it for the week or whatever.
Like Jason Sudeikis in it?
Yes.
Okay.
Who I learned the weirdest thing about. It's not weird. It's just his family. But now I'm obsessed with this idea, and all I can see now when he's on the screen, he is Norm from Cheers. What is George Wendt? He is George Wendt's nephew.
Oh,
and
fun fact.
There's pictures of them together now that I know this, and they look exactly the same actually. Like when you look at them together, it's like, oh, same brow, same chin.
It's like, oh, I didn't see that before.
If Norm were just like 6 inches taller, they'd be exactly the same. Anyway, so Ted Lasso is like that. He is completely inflappable. Nothing but one thing gets him down, and then he's fine the next day. And I love him. So right now I must need stupid, indomitable men.
Well,
I mean, Alexander is not stupid, but
no, but there is something to be said with all the stress going on that you can count on. There's some people that unrealistically, maybe they're not facing reality, and that makes them a comfort to be around because you need someone who's kind of unaware of stuff, maybe.
Well, it is announced to us at the beginning of his censure that this is how he's going to approach it. Mm-hmm. Is you don't let your circumstances conquer you, otherwise you become a slave to them, or something like that. Like, I don't remember the exact quote.
Yeah,
and so like it's announced to us that that's how his approach is going to be.
Can I read? I have another review snippet that I found.
Okay, then I have actually a question that touches upon something you said.
Okay.
But you go first.
This one says, what irked me about this book was the Count's relentless joie de vivre in what should have been testing circumstances. I found the lack of inner depth a problem with all of the characters. They all needed more emotional layers. Not to say that bad stuff doesn't happen. People do disappear to Siberia, and there are some sad anecdotes from minor characters, but for the most part, the tone is lightly melancholic, with a patina of faded glory and a sprinkle of gentlemanly resolve. I was desperate for people to plot schemes of escape or rage against the injustice, or even just fall into despair, something other than wondering how to smuggle in all the ingredients for a bouillabaisse. And I was like, yeah.
That sounded so delicious.
I know it did. It sounded great, but I was still a little like, oh, well, that was an exciting thing that happened.
But I have to say, like, even though Alexander's not an everyman, but he is an example of, I think, how most people get through strife.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you just face it every day. Like, most people don't do extraordinary
Right.
things.
I mean, we've been in quarantine for a year, and didn't you feel like crying at some point? He's been in quarantine for 30 years.
Yeah.
I think that's why he went to the roof.
Yeah, and then nothing, and then he doesn't, and then that's it. You're like, okay, I guess he's fine now.
Yep.
I mean, I understand. Like, he has things to live for now. He has an adopted daughter. He has this girlfriend that shows up, and he's got friends in the triumvirate, and
he has a friend with benefits
happening that he didn't have initially. But
oh, I love Sophie. Like,
but
so when Anna and I were talking,
yeah, that was
Okay.
What?
And he was so mad. Man, I could relate because James hates any sort of mixing of friend groups.
Oh.
Where it's like, I have my friends from here and your friends from here, and he likes to keep things separate. So when things mingle, he just gets really nervous. So that's what kind of
You
what I
know
was
what?
thinking of in
There's
those
some
circumstances.
wisdom. There is some wisdom to that.
Yeah.
okay, so he was kind of flappable then
Yeah.
because he
Sure.
did, and because what was the you like your boxes?
You like your buttons in your box.
He likes your
Yeah,
buttons in their boxes.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, I like that part.
but maybe that's how he holds it together is because he keeps everything compartmentalized.
And also might be a reason that I don't have a problem with him because I am an extreme compartmentalizer.
Uh-huh.
Oh, okay, this is what we're doing now.
I do think at some point, my mind's going blank. Nina. I think Nina coming into his life made a difference. Was that before 4 years or after 4 years?
Oh, before. Like that
Before.
was very early, like the first weeks or two. Or
But
something.
after, but it
Because
was
your mustaches.
Yeah.
yes, that's true. And you get to hear the story later on about the mustaches and
Mhm.
and
No,
why
no,
that was
it happens.
no, but
Yeah, but then
it happens.
he retells it.
He
to-
retells it,
Oh,
so
yeah,
you
so
get
then, like,
some background about it.
Well, we live it with him.
Yeah.
Which I thought was interesting, actually,
Yeah.
to retell it to Sophie.
Yeah,
But
but
you're
you're
right.
We've been here.
It was nice to have
the way
him
he-
recollect it.
The way he framed it though was like, not that he didn't say it like this, but like if his mustaches didn't get cut off, that kind of saved his life because
Yes.
then Nina came up to him and that was why she wanted
Yes.
to talk to him, and then
Yes.
he made a friend, and
Yeah.
you know.
Didn't
The-
anyone else feel a little uncomfortable that a man his age is going around the
How
hotel
old
with
was
a
he
strange?
supposed to be at the beginning?
I
couldn't
hard to
tell.
know. Was he in his 30s?
No, I don't think he was.
late-
I
late
think he was pretty
20s.
young.
Late 20s.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
so he wasn't that.
He was an
different.
adult, but yet I don't think it's weird.
No, okay.
No.
I mean, you don't have to look at every man being friends with a child in a.
Modern.
In a weird way.
Well, it's not modern, Karen. There's probably more abuse in older
That's true.
in behind us than. Anyways,
He's far too proper for that.
Yeah.
Well, there's a question here touching on what you had said earlier, Katie, about the majority of A Gentleman in Moscow is told in the third person from the Count's point of view. There is, however, an overarching narrator with a perspective different from the Count's. Initially, this narrator appears in footnotes and then the addendums,
Mhm.
and then in the historical introductions of 1930, 1938, and 1946. Once again, because I was listening and not
Oh, yeah, I didn't know it
reading,
was done that way.
I just kind of that part of the division of the years. I'm like, oh, okay, and I moved past it.
I tried to pay more attention this time when that happened because I read some of it, but I listened to the majority of it. When a time like a timestamp would come up, I tried my hardest to try and be like, okay, wait, what year was it? Okay, it's been 4 years. Okay, got it. It's hard to do when you're
Yeah.
listening, but
This time I didn't feel quite as lost. I don't know why.
Mm-mm.
I mean,
It-
there's not a lot that changes within the years. He's still at the hotel, so it's pretty easy to pick up where you left off.
I
you
don't
You're like,
know.
oh, so he's a
He
little
progresses.
older now, and
Look,
that's
he progresses in his job, and I'm wondering who pays for this. Is the is it?
Oh, I think
this,
he was responsible for taking care of his own.
But he
Yeah.
doesn't get it. He doesn't do anything that creates money. It's just coming off of the estate. year
guess.
after year.
I mean, he's rich for
What
a
do you
reason.
mean?
Well, he's
He
living
has
in a
a-
hotel.
Well, okay, so
okay,
he,
and initially he didn't have a job. And then he was just someone who came and ate at the various restaurants. And talk about a routine. He had one place for lunch, one place for dinner, different. Um, and then he becomes a waiter, and then he becomes the head, organizer. So he gets some job progression.
Yeah, he had money. The furniture he chose to keep, he makes them lug the big heavy desk upstairs because its legs are full of gold coins.
I didn't catch that part.
And they're rare gold coins, so he has someone who fences them for him.
How did I completely miss that?
I don't know.
Okay, that makes
there
sense.
was several mentions of it.
And it's at the end too when he's getting ready to whatever he's doing.
And he sends some of that money with Sophie. Yeah.
Somehow I just didn't pay attention to oh, he's got gold coins. Great.
Yes, the desk is full of gold, which is why it was extra heavy.
I just thought
he made those poor future friends carry the whatever 4 flights of stairs.
What do you think the narrator's is the voice of the overarching narrator? What's the role in the narrative? I guess it kind of gets in the way. If you didn't have this narrator, we might have it would be a different sense of a book, I guess.
Yeah, I'm curious as to why it wasn't written in first perspective for the stories that were being told actively about the Count, and then when he's telling you this, the footnotes and the addendums, it could have switched back and forth between a first person and a third person, and I'm curious as to why he chose not to, because it just seems like it would have been much more in depth emotionally if it was written. It
would have lost
person.
that fairy tale, groom's tale unbelievability.
Yeah. I mean, maybe he just didn't want that. I can see that. It's his book. He can write it however he wants.
I had a reflection on something I said earlier. So you guys, Maurice Chevalier, that actor, no, famous French actor
it's before your time.
It's before all of our times.
Is he before my time?
1930s.
Yeah,
he probably
definitely.
died in the 60s, I think.
I grew up watching old black and white movies, so I feel like I'm an old soul.
You know who he is.
Yeah.
So, he's a very he's the definition of debonair.
Watch the movie 1888.
Yeah. There you go.
Wow.
So
watch the movie Gigi.
Probably contemporary to this character.
Oh.
Je ne sais quoi. That is Maurice Chevalier. He is the embodiment of that idea. And my grandfather and my dad, to an extent, same kind of charmers. So again, I just think I'm very at home with Alexander's character. Now, behind the scenes, Dad had more depth than that and more demons, but so maybe we're just missing the demons.
Most people do.
Right, we're missing the demons. I don't know about Grandpa.
I feel like the Count was a character that just floated along.
And
his direction was greatly influenced by his relationship with 4 women. Nina, Marina, Anna, and Sophia. So let's talk for a moment about the nature of his relationship with each of the women and how they might differ from his relationship with the members of the triumvirate, Audrey and Emile.
Andre.
I thought it was Andre. Oh, yeah, I said it wrong. Clearly, they wrote it right.
I have one comment before we get into
yes,
that.
Absolutely.
What if, back to the narrator, because maybe, could you imagine that maybe this is free Alexander telling this story back?
Okay.
What if that?
Oh, maybe he might have told him. This is him recalling his story.
Just an imagining of who is our narrator? Mm-hmm. Why does he know all these details?
And that would be why a lot of things are flowered and the language is
you're
flowered and painted a little better.
Right.
It's just a thought. Just a thought experiment. Okay, so the girls and his dudes.
So Nina first, and
the order we meet them, kind of.
Yeah. Nina, Marina. I love Marina, but we'll get to her.
That's one of my favorite moments in the book. Actually, is him and Marina when he
learns to sew.
Yes, I love every time we get to a book and they bring up and honor needlework. I'm just so happy. It happens.
They
in
mentioned
almost every
a bunch
book.
of different kinds of hand stitches that he learned, and he learned to do this and sew on a button, and then he respected the art of it and told her I did appreciate. I mean, how could we not appreciate that?
Yeah. So I love Marina is the sister,
and she's also mother to
sister. Yeah, she represents kind of each of those women could represent different sides of femininity.
Mm-hmm.
So she's the mother, the nurturer, the sister.
But she's also the strong, independent businesswoman. You don't really
Well,
hear
that's
about
her
her with her family.
character.
Her character, I think about women, and although women in Russia had more opportunities at that time period than women in America.
That was a really interesting insight that
Mhm.
book showed me. Is like that the political changes in Russia bringing women up to equality. Like I
that was
never
part
really
of the
understood
that was part of the revolution, is that all are citizens,
Yeah.
regardless of
It was
gender,
pretty ahead of its time.
and that all
Maybe
have
we're
a
just
chance to
behind the
be
time.
equal. They're
Yeah, no, that was
I
that
never
was
really
interesting.
really saw understood that or saw that
Because for
illustrated.
the majority of history, all or citizens or whatever didn't always include women.
Mhm. Yep.
Equal rights for everybody except A, B, and C.
but
And-
maybe
you know?
that's the difference between like Western European versus Eastern European. I mean, I know
Yeah,
Russia
I don't
is
know.
mostly East, but parts of it are West. But
So Nina was the little girl,
Yeah.
and what
Mhm.
was her father? What did he do?
He was like an expert on. He was some kind of farming expert, like because I remember she says something about how he knows everything about tractors or.
Oh,
yeah,
right.
yeah. But clearly she's a handful, and her parents are never around, so she's being raised. I forget who her guardian is, because
She has a
she's pretty much given
a nanny
free
or
reign.
whatever.
Right.
She doesn't really go to school. Until later. I guess when we meet her, she's not yet
she's
school
not in
age.
school. No, she's 9 years old.
Oh.
But they chose not to put her in because they weren't sure where they were going to settle,
Like if
or
they were
going to
be
get sent
there
back.
for a long time.
got
and
it.
then she then they figure out that she's going to be living there for a while, and then she starts going to school.
Yeah.
She falls into one of my least favorite literary tropes, which is overly precocious child.
That
And
was my childhood. I totally identified with her.
I mean,
I
I
annoyed
think
people,
it's
though.
realistic in
Yeah.
a sense, but her character is sort of just, I don't know. It was interesting because she's really cute and precocious as a child, and pretty no nonsense in that she will tell you exactly what she thinks, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then she grows up and she changes from being cute and precocious into just sort of like cold and single-minded. And the way she like spoke to her child and seemed like she raised her child was just, I mean, that might just be a product of the time and where they lived.
I think it's a product of her being so strongly passionate about the party.
Mhm.
I think she's
And-
our symbol of this new time. Like,
Yeah.
in her youth,
believes
she's
in the-
like, breaking barriers and excited and full of energy.
Mhm.
And then in her, as she enters adulthood, she's a true believer.
Yeah.
Until she's not.
So what's interesting about that, though, is that compare that to her connection with Anna. Anna was an actress who, like,
Nina has
like
no connection to Anna.
no, I thought she did. Anna was around. I was thinking about when Anna was first an actress of the silent film era. That
I don't
she.
think that those two characters ever.
I don't think they
No,
ever
I'm just talking about
intersect.
not necessarily personally, but they would have been aware of each other. She was a very famous silent film star, but then she had to reinvent herself and become the poster child of the party in propaganda films. So even if they didn't connect in the hotel, because she was
a similar evolution,
they would have had a similar evolution. And I wonder if part of Nina's strong belief in the party might have been influenced by the propaganda films that she was. You don't think so?
No, because Nina is still like a young. I'm sorry. Anna is still an ingenue when we meet her.
Mm-hmm.
So she didn't move into that because those were still like.
Right,
Like,
it was
remember
before
she-
things changed for her.
Yeah.
She was making films about like love and romance,
And she plays like
she
a
was
flighty-
a young,
A princess.
beautiful.
She always represented,
she
in some
plays
ways, the
girl
aristocracy.
Right.
She plays this girl who falls victim to the times that they're trying to leave behind most of the time.
And then
that time.
they make that change, and she becomes more of a. I mean, she's older then, but she's more of the like refined older woman, and she plays the mother, and she plays the, whatever it is, but she's a stage actor now.
But I think it's interesting that for young gals like some people like Marina, if you were already part of the working class, you had more opportunity. But if you were someone who people looked at as representing the aristocracy, like I think Anna, sort like she was, it was that classic, princess falls in love with common person falls in love with, the prince fall, she's one or the other, but she's never quite part of the people until she has to reinvent herself. I forget where I'm going with this.
Similar arc. Like I can see what you're saying there. They don't intersect, I don't think, but they have a similar arc of this time they're all living in and these changes they're all going through molding them. Like I see that. Yeah.
But I thought there was at some point where Anna was talking to Sophia about how she knew her mother or knew of her, but later
that I don't know.
Okay.
I don't think so.
I think it was only Alexander who references Nina. Maybe Marina.
Yeah,
Marina knew.
I think
Maybe.
Marina did.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting.
It makes sense because Marina would have been would have known, being the person who was fixing the dresses or tailoring, being part of the working class of the hotel. She would have had all kinds of connections and knowledge. But anyhow, we talked about the Count with Marina and his buddy Anna. They had an interesting relationship, I thought, he and Anna. They were not really a couple, but they kind of were, but kind of a...
I mean, they weren't at the beginning.
Yeah, they were one night stand at the beginning.
And then they evolved into a more serious relationship because she does live at the hotel in the later part of her life. Or at least she lives in the city, I think. I don't know.
She stays there more regularly.
She's around more often than she used to be because she was out, making movies or whatever. And now she's back, and I think they just spend a lot more time together. But they do have, I think, I don't know if they ever defined it, but a pretty serious relationship at the end of the novel.
And yet he is able to walk away from her.
No! No! Okay, can we talk about the ending of the book?
Yeah,
we
jump. Okay. He meets her.
Does
in
he?
the little hamlet. The wayfish, or whatever. The way that they describe her every time is the way they introduce the woman that he is meeting. They are together.
Okay, here's one of my other problems with this book. You spend 400 pages and I don't know how many hours telling me this story. 17 hours. Telling me the story. And then you get to the end and Alexander's making plans. You don't really know what they are. You hear about his sort of ruse and the planting of the clues to throw off the scent of his actual trail and where he's going, but you're not going to tell me what actually happens at the end of the damn book. And that's something that bothers me a lot, is like, I want you to tell me a story from start to finish. I don't like when books are left up to my imagination. Like, I want someone to tell me this happened, the end, and then I could be like, great, I feel a sense of completion and satisfaction. But when they don't do that, I'm like, I want to know exactly what happened. And you hear what happens with Sophia
goes to America.
Yeah, and that's great. I liked that. But I'm like, well, where's the Count? I don't know.
Well, I don't know if he stays in Russia, but he reunites with Anna.
I would assume.
No, I presumed he was on his. I presumed he was on his way to Paris. He was going to get out. And
he was going to live in Russia because he loved it so much his
Oh.
whole life that he was just going to go
That's
live
true.
somewhere in
To
Russia.
the village that he loved that grew all the different kinds of apples.
I just presumed that he was doing that on his way out.
I don't know.
That's a possibility.
my problem.
That's a possibility.
I want to know.
But do you think you think Sophia lives in Paris or she lives in America?
No, she lives in America.
She lives in America.
She doesn't go to the American embassy for nothing.
Right?
No,
so
but
why
I
would he be
figured
going to Paris? To go to the American embassy?
I don't know.
To hook up with Anna.
You don't know
the
if...
book? Who had the book?
What book?
His mission was to get the book out of Russia. To get his friend's book.
Oh, his friend's book,
yeah.
Right.
And I lost track of who had the book.
I feel like Sophia had it.
I think Sophia had it. Sophia gave it to the American embassy.
Well, so he talks about taking
The
the
American
book
ambassador
of
person.
essays, and
Yeah.
the stolen razor and slicing all the pages out so he could hide something in it. And I thought he was hiding the book, but when his American friend opens the book of essays, it's full of gold.
But I thought there was little scrolls of it hidden in the clothes.
There was scrolls of something hidden
What
in
clothing?
the backpack.
Hidden in the backpack, that's it.
Because she leaves all her clothing, remember?
That's right. Except for the
Not
necklace.
the necklace. That
That
made me
beautiful
nervous.
blue dress, which I thought was interesting because didn't Marina make a beautiful blue dress for somebody else earlier in the book? Remember them talking about a blue dress? Well, anyway,
I don't know.
just one of the minor little things.
Doesn't ring a bell for me.
Okay, so we're kind of back and forth on this because
We're not
just
done
that's
with
fine.
analyzing everyone. I mean, obviously,
No.
Sophia is his like the best thing ever to happen to him, and she.
I love that she is so completely different,
She is
and
not precocious. She
No.
is a chill, quiet, contemplative child.
she wants to know.
I never
why.
know what to do with those children
Mm-hmm.
because that is not me.
She just I loved her because she wants to know and tell me more and tell me more.
Mhm.
I want knowledge. That's really. I'm
I
happy
love
to
their
just.
game.
Yeah.
I love Zoot. I think that's so cute.
Oh yeah, Zoot. I like
Yeah.
the running up the stairs and trying to get there before the other person.
Mhm.
That
Oh,
as she grew
oops.
older, she kept
Oh
going.
yeah.
Oh yeah, and then
And
she-
that's a great part of the book too. Like has so much
the
parental love for
goose
this
in the
child.
dumbwaiter. Was that not the greatest?
Yeah. What was it that they gave her? They gave her something at the end.
Oh yeah.
It was like one of the things they were giving her at the end was like, this recipe is made of a goose that you keep in the dumbwaiter for
something
5
like that.
hours. or
Yeah.
something.
Oh, yeah, Sophia.
Yeah.
Like something duck Sophia or something like that. Oh, okay. So one of the pleasures of writing fiction is discovering upon completion of a project that some thread of imagery has run through the work without your complete awareness, forming in essence an unintentional motif. While I was very conscious of the recurring of tolling bells, keys, and concentric circles in the book, here are a few motifs, and this is written from the Penguin Random House person, that they only recognize after the fact. Packages wrapped in brown paper, such as the Maltese falcon, Mishka's book of quotations, and the Russian nesting dolls discovered in the Italian's closet, the Count's copy of Montaigne in Paris, the likeliness of stars, such as the freckles on Anna's back and the beacon at the top of the Shukov radio tower, sailors often in peril, such as Robinson Crusoe, Odysseus, Admiral Makarov. I just want to say that. I just want to say Macaroon because I love those. And Arion in the myth of the Delphinus. Okay, this is the next question, and I don't know how to answer because I already lost myself. What role do any of these motifs play in the thematic composition of the book? And if you see me in an airport, can you explain them to me? Okay, this is an interesting question. It's such a long one. I thought it'd be more interesting.
That he tells us these things that he was conscious of trying to plant, and I didn't recognize any of them.
Right.
Like I'm like, okay, that sounds
well,
nice.
the
but
reference to literary characters, like that was definitely
sure.
apparent.
But what does he say? Keys and concentric circles and something else where I'm like, okay.
I thought it was he mentions Casablanca
how Nina got that
over.
key. Like, how did Nina
how did
get
she
the
get
key?
because she's a child who notices
Probably
little
just stole
things.
it.
I think she did. Someone dropped it, and she was there to take it. And she held on.
People are aware that Alexander has it.
Do
You think so?
I think so.
He doesn't really have it until he doesn't really
has
use
it.
He has it, but he doesn't
Just
really
keeps
use it until later.
Maybe I'm mistaken, but I feel like people knew that he had it, and I don't know.
Okay, so there was a part of the book, believe it or not, that I didn't like. I loved everything about the book, but there was one part that kind of threw me off because I thought it was out of character. That here's this aristocratic, honest, charming person, and yet he's basically a thief. He's going in and out of rooms. I'm like, he's hiding in their closets, waiting for them to go to sleep. And if it was me, I would notice if I heard someone
Would
moving.
you?
I'm a very, very light sleeper.
Well, that would have been the ruin of Alexander.
Yeah.
I mean,
I love that whole description of like thank God they're close to 40.
Yeah.
Because if they were younger,
If they
you
were
know
younger.
what? If they were older, they'd be restless.
Right. They were just the perfect age to just be sleeping.
Yeah, maybe that's the problem. Is I'm moving far enough away from 40 that I'm getting into that other one where I don't sleep as well. I did like that description.
I
That
don't
was
have
fun.
a character problem with him on that because he's finally moved into it's still in character to him because you do what the circumstances demand of you so that they do not conquer you. So the circumstances demanded that he do this so that he would have risked anything for Sophia. He runs her to the hospital, out of the metropole, without a thought.
And
like, it never occurs to him that he is endangering himself until his friend says, "You have to leave now."
Yeah, and he's like, "Oh, you right. I should go out the back door."
You don't think that it's... I thought, how can he not be aware that after he's meticulously practically not even looked at those front doors, for over 30 years, and all of a sudden he just runs through them. I mean, there's not this
blinded
invisible
by parental
thing that
love.
stops him. Yes.
That's how strong.
I mean, it's not like an invisible fence for a dog. Like, he can leave. He's just gonna die if he does.
But that's
Unless
the thing.
he has friends to help him, which apparently he does.
Right.
All those lessons on... I always wonder about that. The official, the party official that he was helping, how that if that person had a role later on in the party because he knew about American,
There's another thing that I feel like there wasn't a lot of plant and payoff. There was a lot of plant.
Yes.
And there was not a lot of payoff. Because I'm like, what was the point of that?
I think that he does that purposefully.
Yeah.
Like in
You think it's a red herring?
Here's my thing. I just don't think this book was for me. I don't think it was a bad book. I just don't like it, and I think that's just my problem.
That's okay.
Yeah. It just isn't for me.
But I think it was like in the style of Russian novels.
Yeah, maybe.
Which is why I'm like, I'm finally going to read War and Peace.
Oh, you know what? That is why that totally makes sense because that is why I never could get through Anna Karenina.
But the payoff
But I
is
have
supposed to
read.
be good.
The thing is, many of the books that he lists, I actually have read.
And actually, that's a theme that ties to him. Like, like how much he loves Sophia is like, because they talk about Russian nationalism, is that you would destroy yourself rather than let the thing you love be ruined.
Mm-hmm.
Like, he had no thought of himself, and to save his greatest love.
Mm-hmm. Do we have any other good questions?
We're almost good questions.
Well, I mean,
questions.
Sometimes with those lists of questions,
Yeah,
you're like, that was skip.
That one wasn't great.
Skip.
Except
That's
it
why I
does
say
make it
good
apparent. Yeah. It does make it apparent that thematic setting was lost on me.
Yeah,
I
same.
didn't. Here's a question, but I didn't catch on, so maybe I'm not the one to answer it. Near the novel's conclusion, what is the significance of the toppled cocktail glass in Casablanca?
Oh, I've never watched that movie.
Oh, so he's saying that like, is it Humphrey Bogart?
Yeah.
He's just so like paying attention to every single little detail, and I think it's supposed to be reflective of Alexander like plotting his escape or whatever, that he's thought out every single little detail of his plan.
He really has.
Inflammable.
Yeah. So
indomitable.
Everything except for someone stealing his shoes.
Someone stealing his shoes.
They didn't get stolen. They got taken away by the shoe. The guy.
Oh,
I guess in nice hotels you put your shoes out to be polished.
Right.
Yeah, except they never really talk about him getting his shoes back.
Yeah.
Neither of them had shoes.
Huh?
True. Yeah.
Neither of them had shoes as they escaped.
Sophia didn't have shoes.
Oh,
either.
that's interesting. Yeah.
I like when she showed up and the guy was like, "There's a small child here. Like, there's a boy here." And then he opens the door and he's like, this is not a boy."
Duh.
Duh. Well, he didn't. His wife is the one who said, no.
Yeah.
She recognized, not a lot of other questions. There's just a few. I liked the triumvirate, but I kind of think sometimes I loved when Emil says blabbermouth. He said something to the effect of blabbermouth because after they've been meeting all this time, just three of them, and he just opens.
Alexander ruined it, and he
How
didn't get punished by his friends at all.
Yeah, he did ruin it. The bishop's like, "Oh, you have a meeting? Okay, I'm coming to all the meetings." And now the meeting's in my office.
I'm like, they had this amazing friendship. you would think that he would be just as protective of it, because was Sophia Sophia was part of his life at this point, but
Yes.
I don't know. Just I guess we're almost done. Was there a good thing?
No, like I was saying, I did enjoy that I got to learn more about the history of Russia throughout the telling of the book, which I think is probably the point that the author was making. You know, that's kind of, I think, why he told it the way that he did, is because you're learning over this 30-40 year span of this man's life what it's like to be a Russian person at these various points in time. I don't know how accurate those descriptions were, because I have not been a Russian person in the early 20th century.
But I think I would like to learn more about it.
That's
Russian history
I
from a Russian perspective, not a Western.
All I knew about Russian history was A, what I learned in school, and B, from watching Anastasia. And that's about it.
Me too.
Never saw Anastasia.
Oh my god, it's my first crush on a animated character.
He is very cute. What's his name? I don't remember.
Anyway.
You're talking about the bat, right? No, I'm just kidding.
You know me too well.
So that is what I liked about the book.
Cool.
Some of the characters were likable. I liked. What part was it? There was some part that I thought, I really liked that. Now it flew out of my brain. So keep talking, and maybe I'll think about it.
Yeah, I liked the historical ones very much.
I think I would be interested in reading another book. I thought about reading Rules of Civility by the same author. I did like the writing style. I don't know if it's as long, but it has a timeline. Let me just look at the timeline real fast.
There is something I didn't like, which is I always find stories that are told about different countries in Europe where they default to a British accent. Really
that was
annoying.
Why did he have a British accent? Because he did an American accent for the American person, but why didn't he have a Russian accent?
I enjoyed the reader he completely complimented
all
the content,
all the Russians had British accents. That was kind of annoying.
The reader has a British accent.
Does he? Because at the end he's like, I hope you enjoyed this book. I'm blah, blah, blah. And I didn't hear the accent when he said that.
Huh.
I could be wrong, but I feel like he kind of dropped it at the end.
I feel like
he did other voices. But it irritates me so much.
Yeah.
It's
just generic.
It takes
accent.
me out.
Yes.
Yeah.
I thought that from the beginning.
I agree
why
that
don't we have Russian accents?
But I just had to be okay, well, that's the way it is. The most disturbing one is a David Tennant movie which is a very good historical, an interesting historical movie about the Germans moving into an Eastern European country. I'll have to look it up. And he's a duke or a count, and he's trying to help people escape. And he has a Scottish accent.
Okay.
And he's letting it bloom in this role.
I'm okay with that.
I know, but it's weird.
Yeah, no, it is weird.
It takes you out of the place.
That's funny.
That is one of the most
that is something that bothers me.
rattling experiences.
After a while, I never stopped really noticing it.
I'd sit down. I'm
if
okay, this is how it is.
That voice for everybody's character, that would have been fine. But then when the American shows up and has
he's
an
doing
American accent,
he does two American accents.
They're both bad. I'm like, why is this? Why? If you had just used a British accent across the board, I would have been like, the narrator's British and he doesn't care, and that's fine. That's fine. But then when he started doing voices, I'm like, why aren't you doing a Russian accent for his voice?
Yes.
Yeah, that was out of place.
And on that same bent, female narrators will change their voices to speak for women.
Mm-hmm.
He didn't do that either.
No.
No.
I mean, they'll change their voices to speak when they're speaking in the masculine.
And a lot of narrators will change their voice a little bit when they are being a female, if they are not.
You know who I don't like? Jim Dale doing young girls.
It's a little weird.
I hate his voice for Hermione, and I hated his voice.
She's real annoying.
For Poppet in the previous book. Oh, it's Hermione's back.
Yeah.
Anyways.
Anywho.
I have one other note. One thing that I had a problem with is also it was nearly impossible for me to keep some characters straight, which the author does say.
I love that.
You're gonna get confused with people's names. And that's my fault because I'm not Russian. I'm like, who are we talking about now? I liked when he gave people nicknames. Then I knew what we were talking about.
I finally figured out who Emil was, but I often got confused with the person who was like head waiter versus the person who was at the front desk.
And the guy who was the piano
bartender?
teacher guy.
Oh,
Oh yeah,
He had some very Russian name. I'm like, who are we talking about? Like, it could have been anybody in the book. I'm
well
like,
yeah,
I don't know
because
who that
he
is.
started talking more about the piano person guy at the same time that Mishka became more in the story, and it's like, so I actually
My
had to look up
favorite
the cast
is-
of characters
When
so
he
I could.
grabbed the guy.
No, I like that though. I did like that, but no, my favorite about the names is when he talks about the prince or the other royalty that he runs into,
Mhm.
which is when the author goes on that
Right.
sideline of like, oh, Russian authors only know 30 first names, so
Yep.
good luck. His last name of that character, I can't remember the first name, was Petrov.
Mm-hmm.
And they like talk about him, how he has this kind of beguiling smile or unassuming smile or something. And there's a doctor in town whose last name is Petrov, and she's kind of no nonsense.
Oh, here?
Yeah,
Oh,
in
okay.
Ventura. And so I had to interact with her office while I was listening to that part of the book. I would be like, so I heard about your Russian relative.
Oh, that's funny.
But I didn't.
There's something I was gonna say. I have to come back to it. There was some things that he kept completely straight and clear, but like you said, the names were not as detailed.
Oh, Viktor Stepanovich was the conductor of the orchestra, which I'm like, that's the most Russian name I've ever heard.
Yes, I love it.
And
Oh, no.
Konstantin Konstantinovich.
Wait, isn't that the guy who fenced the...
He's the
Coins for
guy who keeps his finances up to date and delivers
Yes.
necessary items to him.
Yes,
But
that's
Konstantin, well, I guess he's Greek, but Konstantin Konstantinovich, I'm like, okay. There's two Victors.
Maybe he's a Greek
It's
Orthodox.
just so confusing. There's
What
a
they call a
Joseph
white
and a
Russian.
Joseph.
And then Helena. It's interesting. Every now and then you got a little glimpse of his connection with his sister. It took me a moment when there's one passage where he's just about to leave or something where he's sitting under the eye of his sister and like, wait a minute, what? Oh, the picture of his sister.
painting, yeah.
The painting, that's right. All the stuff that he was able to lug up. So it is helpful to have a synopsis. There is at litcharts.com, they have a plot. They have a cast of characters and they describe the characters a lot better.
Mm-hmm.
Like the hussar officer, a young man, and a rival of the count, whom he encounters at a birthday party for a princess. Due to a series of small incidents, the princess having favored the count over the officer. That was a fun little side
when he
story.
killed the guy?
Yeah, there was that. Yeah, but then what he did to his sister was worse. What the officer did.
What an a-hole.
Oh, yeah.
I'm like, yeah. I mean,
I'm not saying I didn't support his decision to kill the guy, but
oh
He
no, I
didn't
know what it
exactly
was.
kill
There
him.
was something that
He
I
just shot him.
maybe he just intended to.
He intended to. He says, and I'm the reason he died, but it was
Yeah.
like this long thing where he
The
ends
long
up in
drawn
a
out.
bad place.
Right.
And
But he did shoot him.
Yes, he did shoot him.
I want to learn
But
some of
that
the
wound did not
recipes.
kill him.
I think they should have a cookbook.
Make us
of the
bouillabaisse, Karin.
bouillabaisse.
Please.
I always think, okay, when I think of that, I always think of like Gilligan's Island, where Thurston Howell III, we shall have bouillabaisse, my boy.
Okay.
What is that? Oh, fish stew. Fancy fish stew.
It was one of the themes of this book is you can tell it was written by a foodie, and I'm like, I just am not that fancy, and I don't care.
Ah!
Hey,
Oh, the part I liked.
I made a
was-
guest streak this week. I'm very proud of myself.
Yeah, see, this was probably a great book for you because you're like, wow, look at all these things about food that I want to learn. I'm like, I don't care. Like, I liked the
love
part
the
with
stuff about the wine.
That was what I was saying. I'm like, that was a fascinating insight into the
Yes.
way that these people think. It's like, you get red, you get white.
Yep.
And it's like, that's all you get.
And not
I
until
told
it
James that,
embarrassed
who is a
somebody.
foodie, and he was like, offended. Like, oh my god, that's horrible. He was like, Count, like, well, how do you know what it is? I'm like, you don't. That's the whole point.
Yeah, if you're in, well, yeah. So you told them they took all the labels off,
Yeah.
and they just judged by
You
color.
Get red, you get white. Maybe pink.
I was so
I'm more of a
jealous
pink
that
wine
he got
myself.
to look at travel guides with the intention of going
Of
somewhere.
actually going somewhere. Wouldn't that be nice?
Yup.
Well, is there
Well,
anything else?
I think that was it. Other than like before you read it, it does help to have a cast of characters, a synopsis of just who the characters are to help keep them straight. there was someone else that I'm just and yeah, there's I would have liked to know more about the handyman that basically who happened to save his life.
There's another thing. It's like, what, that guy, okay, gone. What happened to the bees? I don't know. We're done with that story.
We're done with that
Let's move
story.
on.
Moving on.
Anyway.
It's like 10 years
Have
from
you
now.
guys ever had honey where you can like really taste a difference?
I have.
have.
I've done a
Yeah.
honey tasting, but where like you tried all the different kinds.
Yeah.
I couldn't taste one and be
Oh.
like avocado or a wildflower, but you can tell the difference between them.
Yeah.
I know. Okay, and avocado honey is not as great as it sounds.
No, it's not.
No.
It's not great.
I thought the little bit of historical insight into the rise of Khrushchev was interesting.
Yeah, that was interesting.
I thought, okay,
that was worth a ticket to America.
yeah. I was like, wow, okay, and because I only know like old Khrushchev, I didn't know he was the mayor of Moscow.
Yeah, I didn't either.
So, and of course they talked about Stalin. So it just makes me want to learn
Oh.
more.
Also, the foreboding of starting the nuclear plants.
Oh right.
Yeah.
Like let's see if these
Oh,
nuclear
that's
power
neat.
plants work. And then all the lights go out, then they come back on, and nothing explodes. But you're like, all right.
Yet.
And I always wonder at some point in the story, when did so this would be the beginning of when Chernobyl started. This was not Chernobyl, but
No. Yeah.
It was.
I did not know that they were the first
hmm
people in the world to have a nuclear power plant.
If you guys want some interesting alternative history, again, because Apple TV was one of Dante's Christmas things that he spent his Christmas money on, because he wanted to watch this new like fake documents or docu-series of what would have happened if Russia got to the moon first,
Oh.
and everything's
they
lot
were
more
almost there.
interesting.
They were
That
almost
sounds
there.
Oh yeah, it was
Yeah.
like neck and neck.
Hmm.
I can't remember what it's called. It's like From Here to Earth or something like that.
Fascinating.
uh,
Well.
so, next book.
Yes.
Yep.
So I am not drawing. I just picked a book because I was looking at a list of new books that came out, and this one is new for January of this year, so it's
Ooh.
brand new. It is an audiobook. It's only 8 hours and 38 minutes long.
Well, what a
Because
treat.
we always want to pair some our
Yeah, it's called Outlawed by Anna North. And I have a small synopsis here. It says, the day of her wedding. Okay, so it's a genre that I haven't read a lot of, which is Western.
Oh.
The day of her wedding, 17-year-old Ada's life looks good. She loves her husband, and she loves working as an apprentice for her mother, a respected midwife. But after a year of marriage and no pregnancy, in a town where barren women are routinely hanged as witches,
wow.
her survival depends on leaving behind everything she knows. She joins up with the notorious Hole in the Wall gang, a band of outlaws led by preacher-turned-robber, known to all as The Kid. Charismatic, grandiose, and mercurial, The Kid is determined to create a safe haven for outcast women. But to make this dream a reality, the gang hatches a treacherous plan that may get them all killed, and Ada must decide whether she's willing to risk her life for the possibility of a new kind of future for them all. Featuring an irresistibly no-nonsense, courageous, and determined heroine, Outlaw dusts off the myth of the Old West and reignites the glimmering promise of the frontier with an entirely new set of feminist stakes. Anna North has created a pulse-racing, page-turning saga about the search for hope in the wake of death and for truth in a climate of small-mindedness and fear. So it was sort of categorized as like a feminist take on a Western, on like the classic Western, which I thought
Alright.
sounded
I like it.
fascinating. So
Yeah.
I'm in.
it also has a really great cover.
It does. I like it.
So Outlawed by Anna North, and it is available as an audiobook on Audible.
It's also a Kindle for only $9.10.
Yeah, I think it's on all, like most of the platforms. So, yeah, that's my choice. So,
All right, I
Cool.
look forward to it.
yeah, me too. I haven't started yet, so I'm looking forward to it.
Anybody read anything good since we last?
I haven't read anything.
I started a really good book called Black, White, and the Gray, and it's actually a true narrative. It's nonfiction, but it's the story of this a black woman who's a chef and her business partner, and how they start this. They start a restaurant in Savannah that from a building that was an old, really dilapidated Greyhound bus station. That's why it's called the Gray. It used to be. And some of the conversations, some of it's about race, but a lot of it's too about like, wow, okay, just their personal experiences and it's really interesting
Mhm.
because it's sometimes you hear his voice, sometimes you hear her voice, sometimes each are telling the other person's story, sometimes they're telling their own story. And just the prologue alone, where her voice is first, and I think it's read by on the audiobook, it's read by the actual authors. So
Oh, I like that.
That's cool.
it's really, really good. So I highly, highly recommend it. It's I picked it up and I'm like a third through already. And
Wow.
it's from 2 days ago.
Nice.
It's cool.
Well,
So Outlawed.
I'm reading The Stand, which is a great compliment to a book about having forced quarantine of a gentleman in Moscow read about the pandemic and all the social implications of a pandemic sweeping the nation. It's great.
Nice. Okay, well, we'll see you in a month for Outlawed, and we hope you guys have a great month and listen to our regular podcast. It comes out the beginning of the month. This one comes out middle of the month, so if you miss us in the meantime, February, I don't know what day, the beginning of February, a new episode of our regular podcast will be out. If you have anything you want to say, if you have any insights that we didn't touch on that you're interested in sharing with us, please do. You can email us at stringsandthingsinfo@gmail.com, or we're on Facebook or Instagram or wherever you can find us. Our website, stringsandthingstudio.com. You can send us a message there. And I think that's it. Okay.
Good time.
Thanks for listening.
Bye.
Bye.